So you do need to pay attention to how long that customer stays with you and what that lifetime value is. And I think with paid ads, we tend to just measure the first part, like, ooh, what's the value of a lead? How many leads did we get? And we tend to think that feels really good. But when you start to really dig in and look downstream, and you might realize, in some cases, these ads are bringing customers in, but they're only staying for a month and then they're churning. That is not a win.
Why is it then that vanity metrics still are all consuming when it comes to marketers? It's still the big, discussion point of any report that they're provided or internal outcomes.
Yeah, so a lot of what used to work as, I think, proxies for marketing just doesn't anymore. And that includes things like impressions and clicks, and even like I was just giving the example of raw leads. I think the reason marketers like them is that they're very easy to measure, so they stick around. But they don't tell you if the business is actually growing in a healthy way. And so part of why they persist is organizational. Our marketing tools are built to report on them. And early in your career, as we talked about already, those are the numbers that you tend to
Right.
be handed. And so the shift is really about forcing everything to go through one question, which is, did this create pipeline that converted?
Mhm.
Anything that can't be traced to pipeline is a vanity number.
Right.
Pipeline that turns into revenue at a predictable rate, that is the holy grail. And
Right.
so the industry conversation is already starting to move there. You see less talk about attribution models and more about pipeline and conversion and efficiency. And the truth is, like, as much as everybody loves good attribution, like, at the end of the day, CEOs don't really trust attribution. Like, there's always a way for them to pick it apart and find a reason that it isn't true. And
Yeah.
they just trust revenue. And so the practical move for marketers is to rebuild your reporting and start with revenue and then work backwards and be able to tell that story of what influenced revenues, which channels are actually producing opportunities that close, and then everything else from there becomes secondary. And I would be surprised if your CEO even cares about anything else beyond that.
Well, they don't understand impressions or clicks anyways. I mean, and they don't need to.
Yeah.
It really does not matter. I think that there's such an interesting anomaly that brings a lot of questions to the table that are difficult for marketers to answer. And again, it's the sales cycle. So if you've got an 18-month sales cycle, it's very difficult to have that conversation that you just illustrated because of the length of time needed to ultimately increase awareness and additional touch points. So in that situation, knowing that people are moving closer and closer and closer to decision making, I'm sure creates incredible amount of value. But how do you measure that? How do you measure the signals that the buyer's getting closer and closer and closer during an 18-month cycle?
Yeah, I mean, look, as much as I have a beef with the whole space of attribution, there are tools out there that can help you track all the different things that are influencing, excuse me, your buyers,
Right.
all the different touches you're having with them, and not just like one buyer, but everyone across a buying committee. So I do think you have to understand that, and you have to be able to know, like, almost do a regression analysis and understand what's helping, like what assets, what campaigns do we have that have a higher propensity to move buyers closer to decision. So that is a starting point. But some of what you're also talking about is brand, right? Like, how do we measure
So important.
brand?
Yeah.
And I think brand often gets treated like it's not measurable, which gives people cover to avoid being accountable. And I just don't buy that. I think you won't tie every impression to a deal, but you can measure whether brand is making your pipeline more efficient. And so, you need to look at things like, are inbound conversion rates improving? Are sales cycles shortening? Are you seeing more direct traffic, more branded search, higher win rates in competitive deals? When we launch something new at Sequel, I care about whether it shows up in pipeline quality. So are better fit accounts coming in? Are more senior buyers engaging? Do deals move faster? The mistake that a lot of marketers make is defining success in isolation, where they have brand metrics in one dashboard and pipeline in another. So I think you have to connect them even if it's just directional. And that's okay if it's directional. You can say, like, these numbers are improving. Maybe there isn't like an absolute number that we know is a success, but if things are heading in the right direction, that's a really great thing to be able to report. And I think the more important thing, though, is really upfront, which is before you launch anything, you need to align with leadership on what success actually means. And that's the piece that a lot of marketers miss. Is this about awareness, or are we trying to improve, like, move win rates in enterprise deals?
Mm.
Those are very different programs, but like getting that alignment up front, documenting it, and knowing what that yardstick that you're measuring success against really is, that's going to save you a lot of heartache downstream.
Yeah, I could not agree more. The piece about brand that I think is that is very interesting here is the integrated component of the media types, not just digital, but PR, trade show,
Yeah.
uh, you know, direct mail, which is still very effective in a lot of very large scale B2B programs out there.